When you're working on a mix, it's really easy to get stuck chasing sounds. You keep tweaking, adding plugins, trying different ideas, and it always takes way longer than it should to actually land on something that feels right. That's exactly why I built my plugin company, Carb Audio. We create plugins that help you get the sound that you're hearing in your head much, much faster, and without all of the extra steps that typically come along in the process. We've got the Smashburger compressor, which gives you punch, control, and character all in one place, so you're not having to stack multiple plugins just to shape a sound. We also have Busboy, which helps you dial in your buses quickly with EQ, compression, and limiting, so your mix starts to feel finished way faster. Then we have Slapshot, which gives you space and width, but without the mud and harshness that you typically have to fight using tools like delay and reverb. And then lastly, we have the Gas Can amp, which lets you instantly tap into raw, gritty, blown-out tones that sound great on guitars, drums, keys, and vocals. Each plugin is built to help you move faster, stay more focused, and actually enjoy the process instead of getting stuck in it. Now you can grab them all individually, or get everything with the all-in bundle at the best value. And if you already own any of our plugins, just log into your account, add the bundle to your cart, and you're going to see a personal upgrade discount automatically applied. So if you want to stop chasing sounds and start landing on them much faster, make sure to check out the Carb Audio plugins at carbaudio.com. And if you want to try any of them first, every plugin has a 14-day free trial too. So once again, that's carbaudio.com. Hey, welcome to the Master Your Mix podcast. My name is Mike Navina, and thanks for hanging out with me today. Today is an audio-only episode, so if you're trying to watch this on YouTube, you will have noticed that you see nothing. But that is because we're having some technical difficulties with video recording this episode, so we decided just to go old school with this and go audio-only. But today, my episode is with Dave McNair. If you're not familiar with Dave, Dave is a recording, mixing, and mastering engineer who has over 900 credits to his name, including David Bowie's The Next Day, Stevie Ray Vaughan's In Step, and Bacante's Grammy-nominated record called History. And in this episode, Dave walks us through the full arc of his career. It definitely wasn't a straight line. It was decades of false starts, reinventing himself, having imposter syndrome, and constantly feeling the need to chase sounds that he couldn't get yet. But despite all of that kind of stuff getting in his way, he just continued to push forward because he knew what was important to him. He knew that he wanted to get into this industry and wasn't going to let anything get in his way. So in this episode, he covers everything from starting at the beginning, learning guitar just to impress girls, dropping out of college twice, driving to New York with just a duffel bag, no money, no plan, all just to try to get into audio school. And then he talks about how with so many of the mixers that he admired, he would often have them work on projects that he worked on and just watch how they worked. He learned so much just by sitting in the back of the room, being quiet, and just observing what they were doing and trying to reverse engineer all of that stuff so that he can build it into his own process. So he gets into all of that stuff in this episode today. And Dave's career spans over decades, and I think this is a good episode to listen to in the sense of realizing that not everything is always easy. There's a lot of people who I know feel behind in their career. They're constantly comparing themselves to other people who are maybe a little bit ahead of them, or maybe a lot ahead of them, and they're just thinking like, I can't do that. I'll never get there. Or maybe you're just not sure if like the path that you're on makes sense. You're not sure if you're doing the right thing for yourself and, whether or not you're actually going to hit your goals. I think if you can relate to any of those things I just said there, then this episode is going to be a great episode for you because, it's a good reminder that nobody really gets there in this like straight line, easy way. There's always some hiccups along the way. And Dave is a very detailed storyteller. He goes into every single bit of the process and, the good, bad, the ugly, and everything in between. And so I think that this is a refreshing episode to learn from someone who's been in this industry for so long and has had success, but it wasn't always easy. So with that said, let's just jump right into it. Dave McNair, thank you so much for being on the MasterYourMix podcast. How's it going today, man?
Man, it's great, Mike. Thanks for having me. I actually really like doing interview podcast things. And, you obviously have a great series and a lot of great folks on it. So I'm honored. I'm actually pretty flattered. I watched the Chris Athens thing the other night and it was an amazing one. I'll probably go back and go through all the episodes of which there's, a zillion and kind of find some of my people that I want to watch. Because I still, believe it or not, I've been doing this for 50 years and I still learn stuff.
Yeah, of course. I appreciate that. Thank you for checking it out. And yeah, it's awesome
sure.
that you're familiar with it.
Yeah.
I mean, for people who might not be familiar with you, can you give us a little background on who you are, what your background is, like how you got started with this, and all the fun things that you're up to these days?
Okay. Well, I was born in Texas. This October, I'm going to be 68, I think. Yeah. And got into music right away. I mean, like I can remember being some of my earliest memories. I'm actually one of those people that can like remember a lot of stuff that happened to them when I then find out I was like 2.5 or 3 or something. But one of my earliest memories was listening to music in the back of the car as we went on like Sunday drives. And I can remember staying in the car after everybody went in because I just had to hear like the end of a song. Or I can remember hearing some, top 40 hit, AM radio, in 1964, we lived in Houston, and I remember hearing the phasing effect and thinking, "Oh, what is that? Let me listen to that. What are they doing?" And then, like trying to mimic it by making a tone and holding my hand in front of my mouth and moving it back and forth. I was like, "Oh, maybe they did that in front of the microphone or something." Like I was always like really listening, very taking apart music when I listen to records, and that unfortunately or fortunately that's never stopped. So I had a typical thing. I had a band in high school. Actually, I had a couple of them. I started playing classical guitar when I was 11. I started classical guitar lessons. We lived in Atlanta. The lifeguard at the pool, who I thought was super awesomely cool, would say, "Man, are you interested in playing guitar?" And I'd say, "Well, I play a little bit," because earlier on, I'd begged my parents to play drums, and they said, no drums, piano or guitar. I was like, well, okay, I guess guitar, because to my knowledge, there's no piano in the Beatles. So anyway, a lot of stuff happened. Got really into music, really enjoyed listening to music, loved playing music. They would check the size of my hands, and, whoever played in the club, my dad would bring them up and say, "You think his hands are big enough?" And they'd say, "No, not yet." And then finally they'd be like, "Okay, his hands are big enough." So I started taking lessons at the local store. I got a steel string guitar, learned how to read music. Right from the beginning, it was the Mel Bay guitar book. Had to learn how to read music. So I did that. We moved again to Atlanta, where the lifeguard was taking classical guitar lessons. And he said, "Do you want to come to my teacher?" I was like, "Yeah," I didn't know anything. So I went to his teacher, and he's like, "This kid's a player, and he's going to be a classical guitar player. And he's got it built in. He's got the chops. He's got the concentration. He's got the ear. This is his path." And I loved it so much. I was practicing classical guitar at that point, 6 hours a day. And so I was into it. And Dad would take us to see Christopher Parkening, who was at the time the only American classical guitar player who was really incredible. And he was a machine. I mean, we went and saw him live at a college in Atlanta. And he played two sets of the repertoire without a single mistake, a single finger squeak. I mean, and after that, I went, you know what? I'm never going to be that good, and I want to be the best. So I guess that's kind of the end of it for me in classical guitar. And then a big event happened. I was mowing lawns in the neighborhood, saving my money, and I was out riding my bike, and I stopped by a garage sale, and there was a weird off-brand guitar. It had an SG body and a Stratocaster neck. I was like, and a chrome pickguard. I was like, well, this is pretty cool. And I was thinking, the girls aren't really, I've learned Stairway to Heaven. I'm starting to learn these rock songs, but I'm playing them at the parties on a nylon string or whatever. It's like, that only goes so far. I need to get an electric guitar, get in a band so I can get girls. That was my entire motivation. So
I get it. I got into drums for the same reason. So yeah.
So I brought it home really quick. I was like, I don't know, it's $75. And my mom said, "Well, darling, if you don't get that, I think you're going to regret it. You ought to just get that guitar." I was like, okay. So I went back, took my envelope of my lawn mowing money, bought the guitar, came home, and then proceeded to kind of teach myself rock guitar because, dude, it was like in 1970, there was no bond, there was no internet. If you're lucky enough to live next to Eric Clapton, maybe he'd show you how to do vibrato, but like you had to learn that shit on your own or you had to ask somebody. And I can remember it was a very big deal when all of a sudden I got my hand to do the Eric Clapton vibrato. And I remember it's not about your finger, it's about turning your entire wrist and keeping your finger on the string without moving it. So then high school rolled around and I actually got in Yale, but my parents couldn't afford it. I did not try in school. My ADHD was so bad. My procrastination was horrible. So I always aced all the tests just on my natural brain ability, but I didn't have a work ethic. And I certainly didn't know anything about my ADHD because it wasn't a physical thing. So I found all this much later in therapy and tests and stuff. So now when I look back, I was like, of course it turned out like that because I'm neurodivergent and this is what put me in that direction. So in senior year, I'm like, look, I still want to play music. I still want to be Eric Clapton. My parents are like, well, we think you should go to college as a backup. I said, well, I'm not going to need any backup. I'm going to be Eric Clapton. They went, well, it may not turn out like that. And I went, okay, I'll go to college, but really, I'd really want to be a jazz piano player. Like that's really
Which is what I think most people feel in this industry is like everyone gets in because they have that love of music. And then eventually they realize, oh, maybe I need a day job or whatever. And there's like this struggle of like these dual personalities of like the person who has to make the money versus the dreamer. You know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so I got accepted freshman year, mechanical engineering. It was such a wake. And right before I left, my mom said, well, darling, you're either going to do really well or you're going to get really cynical. And I went up there, failed miserably. So I dropped out. My dad came up to see me. He's like, this isn't really working out for you, is it? I was like, no. He's like, why don't you come home and work and we'll figure it out. So I quit. I went one semester at UT, went back to Corpus. He got me a job at an insurance company. And then I got another band together and we're playing. And this band is even better than the last one. And we're like, I got the same singer from the high school band and then different other guys. And we were good, man, because I, not knowing what my future fate was the one that would pick apart every part on the song and teach it to the guys in the band. The drums, the bass, the guitar, make sure the vocals right. He had to take care of the lyrics. I'm not going to do that for you. But I was the producer of the band.
This is like the beginning of your engineering side of things.
Right. And then I got a job. I found a guy in town who was a pharmacist who had a studio at home. So we put another band together. I'm at UT. I quit. I come home, another band. Well, that band, right when we're getting ready to go on tour, we've got an agent, and now we're going to tour all around Texas, playing all the best clubs and making a bunch of money. Jeff, the singer, said, I'm quitting. And the band fell apart. I was like, oh, shit. What am I going to do now? My dad said, you know, you really liked it when you go in the studio to record those demos and that thing you did. It's like, why don't you be that guy, the engineer guy? I was like, really? So I went down to his office. We crack open the yellow pages. He finds 3 studios in Texas, one in Dallas, one in Houston, and one in Corpus. Calls all of them and says, my son wants to be an engineer. Where does he go to school for that? And the consensus was, well, there's a place in Ohio that's pretty cool. There's University of Miami's got a program, but really the best one is the Institute of Audio Research. All right, I'm going to New York. I don't know how I'm getting there. I don't know what's going to happen, but I know it's going to be big. So I paid my tuition. I paid the one semester at Institute of Audio Research, and I had a little money in my pocket. So I'm there. I got my apartment. I started up at Institute of Audio Research. Everything's going great guns. I finished the winter session. It's coming up on summer. And I see an ad on the billboard at the school for sound man. Long Island based, new wave, Joe Jackson, Elvis Costello, Tom Petty, Bruce Springsteen. I was like, oh shit, these are my people. So I didn't go back to Institute of Audio Research. But the reason I didn't go back was because I answered an ad in the Village Voice for an engineer at an 8-track. So I booked J&J Recording, 30, and my assistant was this guy, Claude. We hit it off. He said, listen, they're looking for somebody here. The studio charges $20 an hour, but they give the engineer half, $10 an hour. And $10 an hour in New York in 1980 was a fat hourly fee. And then he said, on top of that, we have room in my apartment. So I moved out of Brooklyn. Now I'm just working in the studio, really applying myself, dying to figure out why my 8-track productions don't sound like finished records. I was like, okay, what's the special sauce? What am I missing? Well, there was a guy, it was me and Claude, but there was one guy that still came into work every now and then. His name was John Palermo. He taught me everything. And he did stuff the first time the way I'd never seen anybody. Like he took an MXR 12-band graphic, which is like a guitar pedal, ran the snare through it and just railed everything on the top. And he turned to me, he said, the tone is always more important than the noise that it generates getting that tone. I was like, okay. So he's like, go for the tone of the instrument. Don't worry about the noise. You want to maybe worry about the distortion. Don't print super hot, but like whatever you got to do to get the tone. Maybe the toms were mic'd, I don't remember. And you always put your M500 on the vocalist. And that was it. And if you wanted echo, you used one of the Tascam 2 tracks. He had 2 1/4 inches. One you printed to, the other could be the echo. I think we had a cheap spring reverb. And that was it. You had to make as good a sounding recording as possible. And the big question was, okay, do I keep it 8 tracks or do I fill up 8 and bounce it to the 2 track and come back and have 6 more? That was the big question, because you had to ask that question and answer that question before you started, because you would assign mics differently. And what I eventually ended up doing was I took a tip from John Palermo, is he would multi-mic the drums. Sometimes he'd actually even bring in a few of his own, whatever, but he mixed them live to 2 tracks. He said, listen, I'll tell you what, if you don't have a complicated production, do the drum stereo with the snare in the middle and just put the bass drum to its own track. Like just use 3 tracks and then you got 5 more. And that's going to be enough for anything that's really, if it's really going to be complicated, go ahead and print everything to 2 tracks stereo. And now you've got 6. And sometimes the difference between that last overdub that makes it sound like you're winning is 1 track, is the difference between having 6 or 5. So I went, you know what? I want the greater fidelity of 1 tape pass. It always sounds like shit after I come back from the 1/4 inch and print it again. Everything turns to mush. I'm not going to use the DBX. I hate the sound of the DBX. No noise reduction, 15 nibs, pre-mix the drums to 2 tracks. That was my jam. And I did a zillion sessions like that. And that's how I learned how to record. It was just from then on out, it was one long, non-linear journey from J&J recording 1/2-inch 8-track to, working freelance and working in Ocean Way and having $250,000 budgets. And it wasn't a straight line. I mean, there was a lot of downs and ups, but it was basically like the stock market of the last 20 years.
Of course. If you're a fan of the Master Your Mix podcast, you might not even know yet that we actually have a full website packed with a ton of resources designed to help you make better mixes. So head on over to MasterYourMix.com, and on there you're going to find free downloads, cheat sheets, blog articles, books, courses, and a whole bunch more, all designed to help simplify your mixing process, give you more clarity, and help you finish more music without second-guessing every move. And then, if you're looking for more personalized one-on-one help, where I can work directly with you on your tracks and walk you through the recording, editing, and mixing processes step by step, that's exactly what I work on inside of my coaching program, Amplitude. And you can learn more about that at masteryourmix.com/amplitude. And on that page, you can book a free call with me where we can talk through your current process, figure out where your gaps are, and identify the fastest ways to help you move forward with your tracks. And then if it makes sense to work together beyond that call, we can absolutely talk about that too. So once again, that's masteryourmix.com. And then for coaching, masteryourmix.com/amplitude.
It was trending up. So after 25 years of that, I went, okay, well, you know what? I haven't had a really successful record as a producer, but I've had quite a few as the mixer, as the engineer. God, I'd love to produce a really well-known record before I get out of this, but you know what? The bottom's falling out of this quick. We had to declare bankruptcy. I'd gotten it together. I was now living in Austin. I did a whole series of New York, LA, Austin, New York, LA, Austin, New York, LA, Austin. Like I was stuck in this weird feedback loop. I moved to Austin and I'm like, okay, if you want me to engineer your records, you got to make me the producer. And they're like, okay, well, that's fine. So then now I'm producing and and now I'm getting a local rep and I win Chronicle Producer of the Year. I do the 3 hippest bands in town. I get one of them a record deal. Now she's on Atlantic. They tried to throw me into the bus. I still ended up tagging along. That was a painful story. How many engineers that got to the point in the old days of finding the band, coaching them, figuring out how to make them sound good on the record, produce it, shop it, get them a big, fat, huge deal, and the label says, okay, thank you very much. We're going to have somebody else remix the whole thing and maybe re-record a couple things. I had to go, my manager in LA said, you're going to have to go there right now, and you have to march in, you got to tell them what's what. And of course, it's LA, and of course, I spent plenty of time in New York, and I march into that A&R guy's office with both guns blazing. I think before I sit down, I'm like, listen, I got to tell you something, motherfucker. You don't know what she did to get here. I found them in the local bar scene. I had to fire all the band, hire studio players. I then had the band come in during those sessions to watch and see why I had to fire them so they could learn to get better players. I had to get the players to play for nothing for me, tell them I would retroactively pay them union double scale, of which they laughed. And when she got the deal with Atlantic, I went back and paid them union double scale. Ha ha. I picked the songs. I coached this and that. Hell, I played on 2 of them, 3 of them. And I said, you are not going to throw me into the bus. And he's like, okay, well, what do you want to do? I said, if you're going to have anybody remix it, I want Bob Clearmountain to remix the whole thing. He said, well, we'll have him mix 5, but I want this other guy, Jimbo Barton, to do the other 5 or 6. I went, well, I don't know Jimbo Barton. I looked him up. Well, okay, he worked on Queensryche, which has nothing to do with Lilith Fair, Sheryl Crow girl. But if that's what you want to do, my manager said, don't fight him. Don't fight him. Do not fight him. You're already winning. And they don't want you to go to the Clearmountain and say, I was like, dude, I know Bob from the Hit Factory. I've cut stuff for him. She's like, you can't go to Bob's. Leave them alone. But go to Can-Am when Jimbo's mixing the stuff. I went, really? I got to go out there for that? She's like, yeah, go out there for that. That was the most soul-destroying week I've ever had. Well, there was one other time that was even more soul-destroying when I had the same thing happen to me. And Benji and what's-his-face brother got the gig to produce a band I developed and found and did that's a whole other story. But I ended up winning in the end on that one. But with the Casey Crowley thing, so what happened? I went. It was painful. The thing came out, did absolutely nothing. Atlantic was so into it. They were positive something had happened. So they re-released it 3 months later, new cover. I think we added a song. I went back in the studio, cut another song. They focus group tested it. They're like, we don't know. It focus tests great. There's hits on here. She's playing Lilith Fair. And, it just didn't take off. And I was like, well, I appreciate you gave it the best try. And I certainly tried. And, no harm, no foul. And I feel sorry for Casey because she ended up doing a second record for Atlantic, which I didn't participate in, obviously. And that did absolutely nothing as well. So she still is a very talented writer, an amazing person, one of my favorite people on earth. And now I'm living in Austin full time. I'm doing all the local bands. I'm doing the bands and getting them signed, all this kind of stuff. But I'm getting pretty burned out. Now I've had my first kid. He's like 2.5. I'm sitting there watching Lion King for the 58th time with him on the couch thinking, well, my recording career's over. I guess I'm just going to watch the kid while my wife goes to her day job and then acts because she was still an actress. This was wife number 2 I'd met in New York. She was great. She was from Texas. She was an actress, really funny, really smart. Also crazy, but goes with the territory. So we were married for almost 20 years. We had 2 amazing kids, but in those days we had our first kid. We had the house in Austin. I had a studio in the back. I'm going to be the next Daniel Lanois. Now took a big tax refund, bought a 3M 24 track, bought a Mackie 24x8 that I had put in a road case with a custom Bantam patch bay, 1 rack of choice stuff. And I was, recording local bands now. I didn't have to pay studio time anymore. And I was trying to like bring stuff to labels and get more stuff signed so I could get a gig, because that was the only way in those days to get a gig. And as an engineer producer, and I was too far down the track to engineer for other people. Like, look, I now know more. I'm a better engineer than 80%, 90% of the engineers out there. And I'm a pretty fucking good producer. And there's only one guy who I'll still engineer for, and that's Steve Berlin of Los Lobos, because he loved my work. I was at that point trying to be Chad Blake. Like, Steve, he's like, yeah, there's nobody like Chad. He's like, you know what? You don't have to be Chad. Just be as creative as possible. I don't want anything to ever be stock and standard. Clean is the enemy of musicality. It'll be fine. And so I was using all Chad's techniques that I'd seen him do at Sunset when I was working next door to him in the other room. And he'd say, hey man, come in and check out my scene. I'd go in and meet Mitchell and see how he was miking the drums and see the distressor on the mic pointing at the bass drum shell, compressing like 30 dB and going, okay, so that's how he does it. So I find out that he's like, oh yeah, no, I never put the drums in any kind of ambient room. I put him in that tiny, completely dead room, and I put some weird ass mic pointing somewhere weird, compress the fuck out of it with a distressor, and that's my room tone, because it's not the room, it's every micro smidgen of tone on the drums. And when you amplify all that, and if you do it carefully, it sounds like ambience.
Love it.
In those days, Chad never recorded a drum in any ambient environment, period. All those records he and Mitchell did, all those amazing killer records, Slobos Kiko, Suzanne Vega, all 9 Objects of Desire, that shit was all, it's Pete Thomas on drums, my old buddy that I got fired for playing the snare drum, who I eventually recorded. And his kit, his amazing Gretsch kit in a tiny room, totally dead, with a Neumann binaural dummy head for the overheads and a couple of close mics on things. I don't even think there's like a mic on the hi-hat. And then his like a 441 or whatever he fancied that day, pointing at the beater side or at the shell or someplace odd, mega compressed, probably going through a Sansamp for the face flip and a little extra distortion. I remember walking in to his room at Sunset Sound Studio B, and I'm like, oh shit, there's 8 Sansamps on the desk, all plugged in 1/4 inches, on inserts of stuff. I was like, dude, what you got cooking? He's like, this is my new jam, man. This is the thing. I was like, all right, I guess I better get a Sansamp. So now I'm like mixing stuff for Steve. And I've got 2 or 3 Sansamps. Now I've got 2 or 3 of those Line 6 guitar pedals, for echo and shit. And I think I'm all cool. And I think, okay, now I finally made it sound like Chad. Steve's like, that's amazing. Doesn't sound like Chad, but I'll take it. I was like, fuck.
I mean, that's a lesson in itself right there, right? You can copy everything everyone else is doing, but you'll never be that person or have the same quality of sound because they just think differently with it.
Absolutely. And that took that, but it also took, before I moved to LA to be a freelance engineer, it took one of my last gigs at the Hit Factory. So now I've left out so much of the story because, my last gig in Austin in the studio before the covering for the guitar player gig was with a guy named, I did about the same time that I'm doing, the playing at night for Rick, playing Fleetwood Mac tunes and Eagles tunes. I'm also finishing up a 2-week thing at Arlen Recording, of where I was considered the chief engineer. I helped him build Arlen. That's a whole story in itself. It's in Austin. It's a beautiful, beautiful facility. I worked there as the original staff engineer. It started as an MCI 500 series, which was the forerunner of SSL. That throughput and signal path was what SSL copied for their flow. So the 500 was a very early SSL. I got that down. It was a very complicated signal flow, kind of figured it out. Then the studio got an API. I'm like, oh shit, now we've got an API. Now I can finally make my project sound like anything on Toto 4. Because I'm like, that's the sound of Toto 4. And of course, I look it up. I go, Sound Factory, API, C12s on the vocal. So like I borrow C12 from a friend of mine, mic somebody up on this original non-modified API from, the some studio in Detroit. I'm like, shit, that's it. That's Toto 4. Because the console itself is dark. It's got a lot of transformers. But man, 558s and 560s, you just blast the top end. And you do it when you record. You do it when you bounce the tracks. You get a composite vocal. You do it again when you mix. And it was an education in controlling high frequency distortion to get it to do exactly what you wanted to do. I learned very early on, like, wow, I like that airy sound. I don't want it to sound necessarily like Steely Dan, but I want it to sound like Africa or Rosanna. I mean, like that, because that's hitting on the radio and everybody wants their jams to sound like Rosanna. I was like, well, and because I was listening to everything and picking up everything, I was like, you know what? The vocals, the guitars, the horns, everything sounds good. But you know what? They didn't nail the drums. They should have gotten that mid-period post-Peter Gabriel Genesis drum sound. They should have done an English lily white drum sound, but homeboy in LA, he didn't know how to do that yet. So his version of a roomy sound it just wasn't as cool as the English roomy sound. But everything else, they don't have APIs in England. So you've got this early SSL sound with this really creative English drum engineering and shit. And like, well, it doesn't sound as cool and as harmonic and as soothing and seeping right into your brain as the stock API does. But, so you have to, so I said to myself, well, now that I've got the API and I've got the knowledge of this English drum thing, I'm going to beat everybody at their own game. So then I started opening the doors to the tracking room, and the drums were in kind of a big sort of dead room, and the live little airlock between the studio and the control room and the lounge was live as shit. So I put a couple of 57s in there and a gate them, and I've got fucking Phil Collins, but yet the whole thing sounds like Toto 4. I've got the air on the vocal for days.
Nice. Where did like the mastering side of things come in for you?
Okay, here's how the mastering came up. And keep in mind, like at this point, Clearmountain showed me how he does sampling. He's kind enough I cut tracks for an entire album that I knew ahead of time he was going to mix. And what I was leading up to was the other big thing is I was at the Hit Factory. I was doing the phones because they're like, look, we don't want you to be an assistant. You've got too much experience by the time you got here, but you're going to have to answer the phones. You're going to have to do the tape inventory. You're going to have to clean the shit in the basement. You're going to, you're going to have to kind of eat shit, take Springsteen as hamburger and stuff until we have a regular session for you to do. And they occasionally come in and we'll put you on the session. So they put me on a session with an artist who was close to Clearmountain. Her husband was his manager. She was a great singer. She'd won a Grammy for Best New Artist. She decided to get back into it after being a mom. Great person, great songwriter, great vocalist. Of course, I made him rent the C24 and APIs and Focusrites and all that kind of stuff. And I'm trying to make my rough mixes sound just like what I think Bob's going to do, because now I'm starting to figure out how to kind of make SSL sound better, because they're a very different technique. Yeah. I'm like, well, if Bob can do it, I can do it. And so I finished all that. And I'm on the phones one day and the phones ring and it's the assistant in A1, Roger Talkoff. He's like, yo, can you have somebody watch the phones? Bob wants you to come in and hear this mix. I was like, okay. So I got somebody to watch the phones, walked in. He's like, hey man, how are you? I was like, because Bob, if anybody's ever met him, he's like super humble and comes across as super naive and super just like, and he's like, hey man, here, sit down. Yeah, man, the tracks were amazing. He's like, the tracks are great. He's like, I really want you to hear what I've done with the mix. I was like, yeah, play it, And I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to get to analyze this Clearmountain mix for the first time. I've idolized this fucker for the last 4 or 5 years. Been trying to figure out how to get cuts like a knife drums, the whole deal. How does he get the echo on that? And now I'm going to get to hear Bob's mix that I recorded on the NS10s sitting behind an SSL and I'm right here and I hit space bar and the thing, I hit the tape machine and the thing plays. By this point, it's like it's a 48 track. It's a 2-machine A800 lockup. And, and the first thing that happened is it's like one of my favorite tunes on the record. It's one I'd done rough mixes of a lot. Sounded absolutely nothing like my rough mixes. I instantly, completely forgot I was going to listen analytically. And all I could do, even though I tried, was to hear the song and go with the emotional flow of the song. When it ended, I was like, he's like, what'd you think? I was like, Bob, I can't even express to you how amazing this is. Like, all I heard was the song. I can't tell you a fucking thing about what you did engineering-wise. He's like, well, I just try and bring out the best in the song. Like, dude is so humble. So I walked out learning that. I learned that. I learned the whole, it's the touch and the instrument. It's not the mic. I learned all of the classic things that you need to learn at a pretty early in the journey. But then when it finally got to where I had the first kid, I was kind of burned out. And I knew that because I was sitting on the couch. We were watching Lion King for like the 49th time. Phone rings. It's the drummer. He's like, hey, man, I'm the drummer, with the Barking Pumpkins, and we're going to be in there with you on Monday. And I wanted to know, like, what kind of heads and stuff do you want? And I paused for a second, and it's like my life flashed in front of me. I thought, okay, if you called me 2 years earlier, I would have launched into an hour-long soliloquy on the merits of different thicknesses and brands of heads. But now, when I've got the kid and I'm kind of burned out, all I want is you to play the shit right the first time so we can fucking get out of the studio as early as possible. So I said, man, whatever you want to put on is fine. I said, I kind of like the Ambassador thickness, but really, anything's fine. He's like, top and bottom, or I said, I'm going to leave that up to you. Whatever you want to do. It's like, okay, I'll see you Monday. And I hung up. I went, all right, I have to get out of recording. I no longer give a fuck about the process of recording. I certainly don't care about the bands. So what am I going to do? Well, I have no college degree. I may think I'm, Mensa brilliant, but like my ADD is so like, I'm not qualified to do anything. Okay, what else is there? Well, I don't want to sell SSLs. I don't want to sell this. I don't want to go into film. What about mastering? It's like, you know what? I love going to the mastering sessions. I love going to Marcuson's. I love going to Bernie's. I love going to Ludwig's. I love going to sit with Ted. And I realized, you know what? I've been to every major mastering house. And I've watched those motherfuckers work for 25 years, and I don't know exactly what they're doing, but if they can do it, I can do it. So I was like, all right, I'm going to pivot to mastering. And there was a local studio in Austin that had a Studer Diaxis, and it was a place where I'd recorded many times, knew the owner, loved him, brought him tons of work. And I said, man, can I bring a project in I just finished and master it myself in the Diaxis room? He's like, oh yeah, I'm fine. He's like, what do you want? He's like, yeah, I'll just use it. It's fine. It's no big deal. I've kind of given up trying for that room to make money. Me and the other engineers use it. So he said, I'll have to give you a quick tutorial on the Diaxis, but it's easy. So he said, you know what? I'll have Jim give you the tutorial. And Jim was a guy I'd known, friend of mine. He was a bass player, engineer, really great bass player. But he had decided before me, he's like, you know what? I love playing with Bob Mould. The bands are great. The camaraderie is great. I love playing music. I still really like engineering, but you know what? It's just, I see the writing on the wall. I'm really into mastering now. And so he got into it really before I did. So he's like, yeah, man, let me show you how the Diaxis works. He said, and here's kind of how you get it sort of loud. I like to do this. I like to do that, but do your own thing. So I'm off and running. I'm doing my own projects, and I'm doing my projects that I have at this point now done an entire record, recorded, engineered, produced, made the coffee,
you've literally done
rehearsed
everything.
The band. I've done everything, and I had a budget of $10,000 to do it because now I was not getting the major label budgets. I was not getting the indie label budget. label budgets. I mean, I did Casey Crowley for 16 until we like ran out. And I said, look, her band's not going to cut it. We got to finish this record. And the guy's like, I can't give you any more money. I was like, all right, let me get some guys to come in and do me a favor. So 16, at the point I stopped engineering, it's like, well, 16, I'd love to have 16, but now I've got 10 or 12. I have got to make $4 or $5 grand for myself. I've got to do it, because I was not like, oh, just roll in. We'll record the whole thing in 3 days. You guys will no, I'm producing him like it's $1 million record. We're spending a month on it, and I'm overdubbing and punching in. And now you couldn't edit and tune because Pro Tools was not happening yet, but you could still spend a lot of MF and time doing a multi-track band on analog tape. And I would usually pick what I thought were the emphasis tunes, and I'd hose them on the other 7 tunes, and I would make 3 on the record that somebody was paying for, very little, sound like a hit song. And because I'd been hired to engineer and produce records with huge budgets, those just hadn't hit enough for me to get more calls to do those gigs. So I was familiar with the responsibility, the pressure didn't bug me, but at the point at which I transitioned out into mastering, I'm like, you know what? I don't want to feel the vibe in the room. I'm really sensitive. I feel like I have to be a cheerleader all the time. I'm an introvert. I don't even like people. Now I've got to be with this band and, try and get what I want, try and get what the label wants, try and make the band happy. Fuck this recording. I'm going to jump into mastering full steam ahead.
Love it.
So I'm going to work at Cedar Creek. I'm going to learn to teach myself mastering. And then right about that time, it's about 1999, the internet started happening. And I was like, I couldn't decide whether to get Mac or PC. My wife at the time was like, just get something. I was like, well, but the Mac, because that's decision crippling being a Libra. You're always weighing the scales back and forth and back. And then the ADHD. So I was like, and finally I worked with some band. I recorded some band. Keyboard in the band said, you know what, man, I'm going to build you a PC. I was like, okay, fine. So he built me a PC, hooked up to my 56K dial-up, and now it was online, and I discover Rec Pro Audio. And I go to the thing, and it's like, there's Brad Blackwood's there. I'm like, and I have a whole dialogue with him. Eric What's-His-Face, who was Mixer Man, was there, who, by the way, I knew who was from the very beginning because I gave him the name, Bitch Slap for the band, Because, we were friends, and he talked to me. He's like, what am I going to name the fictional band? I said, call him Bitch Slap. He's like, I love that.
So you started learning from those guys then online, I'm guessing.
Well, I didn't learn anything from Eric Seraphin because he was a mixer, and I'd already done a lot more than he had. But I learned from Brad Blackwood, who was ahead of the curve on me. And he'd not really been a recording engineer. He went to Full Sail, decided he was going to be a mastering guy, had a little house in Memphis, and in the spare bedroom, had a couple of 802 B&Ws and a skeletal group of gear. But he would have these shootouts and stuff, and then he became a forum guy, moderator, and I'd always do the shootouts and go, fuck, why didn't my shit sound as good as Brad Blackwood? He's killing me every time. Like, I got to figure this out. And it was always just this insistence to not accept anything other than, I got to beat this guy. I was the most quietly competitive fuck in the entire thing.
Well, it seems like that's part of your story, which is that you found these people that you admired their work and you would constantly dig in and learn more about how they did it and just try to one-up them or learn it, right? Yeah, I love that.
Well, so I was mastering freelance, of course, because, I can never be the assistant at the big studio. I always have to be the head cheese in my mind at the bohunk in the middle of nowhere. So I was the chief engineer at Arlen in Austin, and Austin was not the city it is today. It was not even a third market. It was like, nobody records in Austin. It became a thing later on, but now I'm chief engineer in Arlen, big deal. Willie comes in every now and then. I get to record Willie. He's super cool, the Buddha of country music. I'm learning every day on sessions. I'm getting paid by the band on a farm account check. They're farmers. They come in on the weekend. I record I learned about salsa from an army band that drives down every weekend from, Fort Bragg. And they teach me how to record salsa. They're all Puerto Rican guys from New York that are in the army. So now I learned how to record salsa. They teach me all that. So I got a great education at Arlen. And then I would learn from whoever came in. Nick Lowe comes in and records stuff. He brings Colin Fairley from England, this beautiful mastering engineer, this recording engineer guy says, he would be like, "Aye, laddie, here's the Jeff Emmerich 1176 setting." And he put like a China marker on it. That China marker never changed for 20 years. Like, that's how you get Jeff Emmerich 1176. So I like to learn all this stuff from all these guys. And while I didn't know what I was going to do tomorrow or what I did yesterday, because I'm so neurodivergent, I somehow kept all these incredibly somewhat related factoids in my head for like the whole time. And I could pull them out at will. So now I'm assembling my toolkit of stuff. I've transitioned into mastering. I'm starting to assemble a mastering toolkit. Now, when I'm going to sessions in Marcuson's, I'm not telling them that I'm mastering, but I'd be like, what do you do? How is it you'll decide to use that? And be like, well, if the material's like this, I'll do that. I was like, okay, well, like, how do you get the loud things? Like, well, I like to do. I just like, it was an era when independent mastering was just about to start. And I started doing it the year you no longer had to send a 1630 or 1610. You could actually send a CDR. Like, that's the year I started my mastering journey. It was like 1999, 2000. I went to see a Springsteen show. It was like the first reunion of the full E Street Band. I emailed Steven because I had done a whole bunch of projects with Steven as an engineer, co-producer. We were pretty tight. I hadn't talked to him in years. I hadn't run into him. Waited 2 days before the show at the Irwin Center in Austin. Email comes back. U+1, pick up your things, full backstage, whatever. I called the guy that in Corpus Christi. I was now living in Austin. I called the guy in Corpus Christi that I had gone to see Springsteen in 78 because the head of the store, Craig's Record Factory, that was using my jingle, couldn't make it because Craig had to have some operation. So me and his head salesman, I was like 17 or something. We drove to San Antonio. We saw the Darkness on the Edge of Town tour. I was like, oh my God, it blew my mind. And now he's coming to the Irwin Center in Austin with the first time these three bands played together after doing his solo records. I go backstage, I meet everybody, get the last couple to sign my Born to Run that I missed signing when I was in the studio recording everybody. Like, there was one or two people that weren't in the studio. I got everybody to sign it. And, I talked to Steven and stuff, and I see the show. And after the show, we're leaving. I turned to Roy, my friend. I said, "You know what? I'm moving back to New York City." He's like, "Well, all right then." I came home and told my wife, like, "Look, we're selling the house. We're moving back to New York." She's like, "Well, that's surprising, but okay." I mean, I was loving New York. I think things were happening, but I fell in love, and I was happy to move down here with you. But yeah, I'll go back to New York. So in 2000, we sold the house, and we moved back, and we got into our apartment in September of 2001. And you know what happened on the 11th? So I was there for that, but I'd sold everything, and I had just enough money to take my home-built Dun Audio hi-fi speakers. I'd bought a used English, it wasn't Sonic Solutions, I'd bought a used Cyndi system because Blackwood said, "Hey man, there's a Cyndi system. You should get this. It's like $3,000, And in those days, it was like a 2 gig. I was like, all right. So I got the Cyndi system. He's like, the converter's not very good, but you'll figure it out. And I used like an L2 hardware as the converter. I would rent a massive passive from Dream Hire, and I was mastering in my apartment. I had an HR 102 that I brought with me from Texas that I'd bought on a Craigslist listing for $500 that barely worked. But so we're in the Upper West Side, and I'm mastering in my apartment, and I had the presence of mind to go, all right, this is the one time you need to be careful about this, because you think this is all, you've just been mastering your own mixes, and your mixes are killer, and all you thought mastering was a little bit of bass, a little treble, and so let's give it some level. And now it's a lot more than that, because people are starting to send you stuff that you didn't work on. You got to figure out how to make it sound good. The temptation is to call the Steve Berlins and all the other producers you work with and say, yo, bitches, I'm mastering now. And I was like, nope, I'm not going to do that because I think I've got it kind of together. And there was a long series of studios where I kept finding better places to put my shit in, and I'd lose the lease every year. But I just like, nope, I'm not going to open the door to the records that people will actually hear because I don't know if I'm good enough yet. I'll just do all these people that nobody's ever going to hear the record. And that may sound harsh, but that's just the reality of it. I was like, even if I love the music, like, wow, these guys are great, but you know what? There's no critical mass. There's no deal. They did it for nothing. They'll be lucky if their mom and their girlfriend buys the CD. So I was like, I'll be safe here. I'll make this sound as good as possible, please the band, but I don't know how much better. It could have probably sounded 20% better if like one of the real dudes did it, but they don't know that. I don't know that. I don't know that to that extent yet. I'll keep learning. I'll keep plugging away. And at some point, I just finally got to the point where I said, you know what, man, let me tell some of my old friends. And like, it was pretty scary at first because suddenly I've got like Steve Berlin sending me name stuff, just trusting like, oh, well, if you say you could do that, you've always done what you said you could do for me for the past 20 years. I'll just let you master this thing. And at first it would be like something I had recorded and mixed. So it's like, well, it's not going to need too much, but I got to be careful because it's a lot more. I told Steve, I said, you know what it's just like? It's like making a tortilla from scratch because I'm from Texas and I got to the point of making and it's like, it's nothing but the flour or the masa, some water, and a little bit of some kind of oil or lard and maybe a pinch of salt. That's all there is. But go home and try and make a tortilla that looks and tastes like a Mexican restaurant. Good luck. So I figured out like, all right, there may not be a lot to this mastering as compared to mixing a 72-track 3-machine lockup at Ocean Way, but I don't know everything yet. So I need to be cool and learn as I go.
For sure. It's very different when you're working on your own stuff versus someone else's. Obviously, like you haven't seen how it was made. So, I'm curious to dig into that part of your process. Like when you do start a new project for someone, what's your mindset going into that project? Like, where do you typically start? What kind of things are you listening for? Do you have a specific process that you follow? Like, what's that look like?
Okay. Well, I mean, I might sound kind of cavalier just because I've been doing it for so long, but it might have been a little different back in the beginning. But once again, my memory, Mike, is so bad. And I got sick about 2.5 years ago and the disease has made my memory much worse. I'm okay now. I'm on a trial drug now, but that's a whole thing I'm not going to get into. But if you'd asked me 2 years ago how much, I was like, I got about 3 years left. I've had a good ride. I'm not bitter. It's fine. I'll just keep making records till the sand runs out of my hourglass. That's basically where I was. Well, the trial drug that I've been on since January has basically turned everything around. I don't have cancer. It's actually more serious than cancer, and it's way rare. It's only about 4,000 people a year in this country get it. It's called light chain AL amyloidosis. You can look it up if you want. So I've been fighting that for the past 2.5 years, but I feel great now. My energy is back.
Sorry to hear that you're going through all of that.
Yeah, I'm getting rid of the last of the effects. I have to get the plaque out of my heart. I got to get my kidneys back online. But my energy is back and I feel amazing. But anyway, my process is I usually do about a 2-hour thing in the morning. I really can't get up early anymore because I've been a late nighter my whole life, but I try and get up around 8 or 9. I have to get up early in the 2 workout days because those are 8:30 and 9. Today was the 9 o'clock one. But the other days, I really try and get up about 8:30 or 9, but I love working late at night, and I usually have a second wind, so sometimes it's hard. So it takes about 2.5 hours because I do, first thing I do, I get up and make some coffee or tea. I turn on the sauna, let it warm up. I hit the yoga mat. I do some free weights. I do some stretching. I've got the tub downstairs set, with ice cubes. I do a cold plunge and I go up and shower. Then a lot of mornings, if I really like, you know what, I got to sit my ass down. I'll sit on I'm a Buddhist. I've been Buddhist path the past 15 years. I'll sit in the cushion, do at least 20 minutes, set an alarm, 20 minutes, 22 minutes. Then I come to the studio and now it's like, it's 12:30. Then I go home and have lunch and my midday pills, and I come back and do another set of work. So I have a full-time production manager. I'm lucky to have, luckiest guy in the world. She's an ex-Sterling employee. She knows everything about mastering, about the business. She does everything. So I pay her very nicely. I mean, not as much as she's worth, and not as much as when she was at Sterling, 20 years ago, but she's great. Danielle Cresfuli. So if Danny and I have been friends who work together now for, 15 years. And what she does is anytime I have a person that hits me up about something, I just copy and paste it, send it directly to her. Sometimes I don't even get back to them. Sometimes I don't even say, hit up Danielle at this email. So I'll just send it right to Danny, and even without a comment, just, it's your job. So she'll reach out to him. She'll make the deal, find out when I want to do it, put it on the schedule, tell me how much they're going to pay. She doesn't usually ask me. I'm like, look, get as much as you can. But, if it's somebody we work with a long time, give them the deal. If it's,
so she's handling the business side of things.
She handles the entire business side.
Yeah. So then when the audio actually gets across your desk, like where are you typically starting there?
So I come in, I open it up. I typically not even the night before. I'm listening to podcasts and watching Diary of a CEO. So I don't even know what I'm going to do. So I open up Google, look at today. It's like, oh, Kristen Weber, Sweet Relief version 3 instrumental. And then Master Your Mix podcast, 1:30. I have to call John. I know who that is, but here's John's phone number. Between 3:30 and 4:30, I actually told Danny before I got on with you, I said, look, I don't know how late this is going to go, but you know me, I can go forever. It's not really important I call John right now. I'll call him later, so don't worry about that. So, and then I open up the thing. It's usually got the download link. I download it. I open the file. I don't have to think about who it's going to, because I only send the finished stuff to her, and she distributes and sends the bill that nobody gets anything unless they're paid in full. I don't need half up front. Just like, when it's done, pay me the whole thing and you'll get the thing. So that's the method with her. So open it up. First thing I do is I have to figure out what sample rate it's at. And it really annoys me that people don't put that information on the file a lot of times. So maybe I've already got a session open and I unzip the file. I make a new thing, make a new folder with the name of the band, download the stuff, put it in there, unzip it. I probably already have a Sequoia session open. I always capture 24, whether it stays digital, whether I go analog. It's always the native sample rate, and the bit rate is always 24, regardless. So I make it 2496. I put them in sequence first. The session opens with my session template, which is really nothing more than like one plugin on the master output. Actually, there's 3 plugins. There's a level plugin, which is one of those, I forget who makes it, but it tells you the RMS and all that kind of stuff. It tells you if you got, overs.
Yeah, it's like
stuff.
A metering plugin.
Yeah, a metering plugin. And then I've got TDR, Gentleman's Edition, limiter number 6, that I have everything turned off except the final output. And for a long time, I was using it to sit at minus 0.3, or I was using it to determine my final output level. So I use Gentleman limiter number 6 to determine the output level. And literally the only choice was true peak or just, regular. And most of the time I'd be like, you know what? I don't really care about the true peak. And I just leave it on PCM and, to blow up, but it wouldn't show it blown up because I'm not operating in that 32-bit environment. Like I know it's going past 0, but it still says minus 0.3 because I'm only keeping the PCM ceiling on it. I'm not oversampling it to see if it's true peak, So, and I'll render it and it'll be like true peak is like 0.8 of like, it's okay. It's like a dB, whatever. It may light some red on somebody's converters, tough shit, whatever. And then sometimes I'm like, you know what? This thing is really loud. They really want it loud. There's like a dB and a half of overshoot. I'm going to go ahead and see what I need to do to tame the true peaks a little bit. It may not be about turning on true peak. It may be about something else, but let me try and get the true peak down to be a little more manageable, whatever. But other than that, it opens with the limiter that I'm currently favoring using. I have a whole new set of limiters that I'm rotating to now, so my template actually needs to be updated. But for the longest time, it opened up with AOL invisible limiter, not the fancy one, but the basic invisible limiter. And I used it always on one setting, only one setting, and that's no limiting, but cranked up 10 to 12 dB and set on through. The choice is suppress, through, or something else. I used suppress for a long time. That's pretty good. It holds a little bit of a ceiling on it, but it slows it down a little bit. So for the last couple of years, it's been AOL, invisible limiter, 10 or 12 dB in through, and that tells me exactly how loud I need to put the playback file, whether it's analog or digital. I try and get the unlimited. I don't always. Actually, these days, I always do because I've told all the knuckleheads to go away. So I'm very intentional about who I work on now. And as a matter of fact, I now won't take on your project unless you're going to vinyl, or I know you really well, or I know it's going to be great, or it's a pop thing that I know the person. I was like, you know what? I'm in some mood. I'm in the mood for some loud as shit, bright as shit, 14-year-old pop. And I'm going to kill this fucker. But I don't want to do that more than once a month.
So you talked about how the limiter is like the first thing you'll do, and you're mainly focused on getting levels. But then as far as like additional processing in the chain, what are you typically listening for to inform like what's next in the chain? Or is that always just part of your process?
Well, if I really like the music and I really like the mixes, and I'm just totally honest, like if it's from a regular and for them, this is a rent gig, and I'm like, look, I'll take your rent gig. You've sent me plenty of great stuff in the past. I'll take these band that's just the most banal, boring, it's been done a million times thing. I'll do this for you. And like, it sounds good. Well, that one's staying digital because you can bet your ass I'm not going to take the time to do it analog and write all the shit down for some band I don't really care about that sounds fine and will sound just as fine staying digital. If it's something that it's really close to my heart, I'm like, well, I've never heard of these guys, but this shit makes me want to cry. And it sounds okay. It sounds pretty good, but how it sounds is immaterial. I love this music. It's going analog. So I do a shootout of one tune. I do them both digital and analog, see who wins. That dictates the course for the rest of the record. Sometimes, if it's a long record, if it's 14 tunes or 16 tunes, I'll get 8 or 9 into them and go, all right, we've used analog. It sounds great. I know how far I can go with it. I know what the analog's going to do. I'm doing the rest of these turkeys digital. They'll sound so close because now I'm copying the sonic vibe of my previous analog ones. And I can nail that stuff digital, but you have to really work at it. You have to have a curve that's very strong within your head telling you what it's going to sound like if I use the Soundtech. And it may be the Soundtech plugin. It may not be the Soundtech plugin. It may be the NIF plugin. It may be, I want to use the real NIF. No, the NIF plugin is plenty fine. It actually sounds better on this project than the real thing. So I cast what I'm going to use gear-wise to my time, my interest, and what I'm getting out of it. And I come to an executive decision based on, you know what? I'm just going to have to sit here for 5 hours and work on this record because there's a lot of tunes. They all need to be analog. There's a lot of shit to write down. I know I'll probably make a mistake. I'll have to go back and redo this or that. It is what it is. Settle in. You're going to be sitting here listening to these tunes for about 4 or 5 hours. But normally, I can do a 10 or 11 song album in like an hour and 15 minutes or something. Like I needle drop the loud part. I needle drop the quiet part. I decide right away what the dynamics process is, if any, is going to be. Is this just going to rail against the limiter? Am I going to try and feather it out a little bit with dynamics? What am I going to use for EQ? That's barely and I've done it for so long, I don't even like audition different EQs. I just like, well, this will be the one. And like, even if I have 10 choices in plugins and like 5 choices in analog, I was like, well, okay, is it going to be the Terry? Is it going to be the NIF? Is it going to be the Soundtech? Is it going to be the EAR? Is it going to be the Neumanns? Is it going to be the... I'd be like, you know what? I don't really have time today. I know it needs to be analog. I'm just using the Terry today. Today it's going to be the CEQ.
Hey, just commit and feel out whatever you can get out of it.
I just commit and do it, and I'd be like, all right, I got all of them in here. They all feel pretty good. I'm going to needle drop real quick, see if anything. All right, you know what? I can buff out this vocal a little bit. Let me drop a D&G equilibrium on it, mid-side. Let me EQ this vocal just a little bit better. But my initial thing on the EQ is I always work in MS, always, every time, all the time. Very rare instance, I'll use stereo. Barry Wilson at Sterling, he'll tell you, MS it's like the three-legged stool. It's never wrong. And he's right. Fuck, phase, bullshit, all this stuff on the internet about it better be careful with MS. I'm going to tell you right now, if you're not doing MS, you're not doing it like the winners are doing it.
I've also read that you're very big on like making sure the vocal is clear. So it makes sense to work in MS because then you have that control right in the center.
All I do from years of mixing, and of course I learned this from Bob et al., is when I'm mixing, I learned a long time ago, don't get stuck on that fucking snare drum. Like, you're Michelangelo, and you're sculpting David, but don't get stuck on the ear. Get the whole statue. So Bob's like, okay, all the faders go up, vocal goes up loud, no EQ. All right, let me EQ this vocal a little bit. All right, shove off the low end. I'm not going to add any top to it. I'm going to compress the bejesus out of it. LA3A plug-in, absolutely pounding. Put that vocal up loud. Okay, got to pull a little more low end out. All right, now I have a roadmap, spectral-wise, for how I can EQ all the rest of the instruments because I've got the top end where I want it on the vocal. I'm not adding any top. I'm pulling out the weird boxy spots. I'm making sure the resonance good. Vocal sounds amazing. Now let's EQ the other instruments. And I do the same thing with mastering. I put it up. First thing is like, all right, well, this vocal's not loud enough. So I start EQing and yanking and cranking to make the vocal sound as great as possible to me. I don't even give a shit what the other instruments are doing. I don't care about anything. I'm listening solely to the vocal, its relationship to the track, and when it has the perfect combination to my ear of definition, air, silkiness, forwardness, low-end resonance, chest, and sits at the perfect level throughout the entire tune. I did a tune last night with two different singers. It was kind of a duet thing. They each had very different tonalities. The tune was actually on the dark side to begin with, but one of the vocals was kind of bright. I meticulously went in after I got my basic EQ, laid the whole thing down, sliced the capture down 10 different ways, and used different soothe and EQ settings on different phrases of the vocal to make them play well together.
Makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. And also, like, yeah, if you get that vocal sitting right, then yeah, you got that clarity. And, you know, in the case of a dark mix, you're probably most often boosting some stuff in the vocal to get it to pop out a little bit more. So that's going to make the mix sound brighter. Yeah.
What I did was the guy that started the tune in the intro was very dark and very mid-rangey. And this is from a mixer who I've done a lot of stuff for, whose mixes are absolutely perfect. I usually never do anything. That's another lesson. Like, what happened with this guy last time? It's a different day. Don't have any preconceived notions. And I pulled it up. I went, this is really dark. And it's really kind of got, where is that mid? I searched and I went to the EXA and I did I don't search by boosting, I actually search by cutting. And I mean, I know that's weird, but I do just the opposite. I do a little narrow notch, and I sweep, and I do a full cut, and I sweep that sucker till it nukes just the area that's bugging me. And then I decide how much that I'm going to nuke. And it may only be 2 dB, maybe a dB and a half, but I'm sweeping that frequency thing with a narrow notch with 10 dB of cut. Because if I boost, it's all going to sound weird and boxy. Like, I can't isolate, is it 400? Is it 480? Is it 500? Is it 520? Wait, there's something at 280 and there's also something at 660. Like, I can't get that by boosting and sweeping. I have to cut. So I determined, well, for this guy to sound good, I need to bring a lot of the chest down. It's really chesty. Where is that? It's two different frequencies. It's 160, it's 240, narrow, and he's really dark. Is it a shelf? Is it a peak? I don't know. So I was like, all right, now that lead vocal sounds great. And I let the tune play. Well, the next guy come in, he's screaming bright. I was like, all right, I have to go back. I got to split the difference on the first guy. Let me split the difference on him. Not as much boost, not as much cut. Now let me see what I need to do to tame this guy. He doesn't need a shred of top. He's actually a little thin. He needs a little chest boost. So I'm going to carve up his regions, and I've got my one analog EQ setting. It ended up being actually pretty complicated. It ended up being like 4 different things, which I have yet to write down. I put my thing right in front of me to remind myself, don't turn a single knob on this podcast interview. You got to write this thing down. And I haven't done it yet because it's taken me a while to write it down, but it was 4 devices. It ended up being a CQ, my VacuVox U23M tube compressors, the Soundtech 430B, the AXA, the 430B, the U23, and the CQ. And I use plugins. I used the Weiss de-esser, and I used Soothe 3, of which I was the alpha tester, and basically spent a year going through about 14 versions with them and the other guys. And I got to tell you, I was using beta number 4, but I'm now using Soothe 3. I'm using the official final release, and it is absolutely killing. If any of your readers, mix or mastering guys, have not checked out Soothe 3, it's a game changer.
I haven't played around with it yet, but I got to get my hands on it. But I know a lot of people that love it.
It's totally it. So I'm using Soothe 3 all the time. And, even to the extent that I opened something I did 6 months ago for a revision, or all right, we're finally, oh, fuck, I got to replace all these Soothe 2s with Soothe 3. All right, well, if that's what I got to do, that's what because my level of standard is absolutely uncorruptible. I don't care how long I got to stay. I don't care what I got to do.
So just real quick, so going back to your process, obviously it sounds like you're kind of finding, in the case of this particular record, you're finding the averages, and that's kind of your process is just figuring out how do I get the best of the vocal, but also find the foundation of the, find the average setting that works best for the entire production. That's kind of what it sounds like.
I'm equally at home with broad strokes and narrow cuts and boosts and stuff.
Gotcha.
Dude, so many years of mixing. I am comfortable doing all of it the most.
For sure. So then how do you know when you're done with a master then? Because there's obviously so much you could do. So
that is just the experience of having done it for a long time. You got to put the 10,000, 20,000 hours in. And I can remember various times where I was testing myself. And of course, remember, I had a lot of benefit. For almost 20 years, I sat with the best mastering guys in the business. I sat with the legends, watching them work on my own mixes. And I watched them all work. They were all old school. It was pre-digital. It was when you left the studio with a cassette in the beginning. Then later on, they give you a CDR. They give you a DAT. And then they'd say, well, we give you a CDR. Price is really $75, but I'll give you 2 for $25. Then you'd leave with a CDR. And then, so I learned from all those guys. So when I started, I'm like, well, there's a temptation to needle drop, but that's not how the big boys do it because they've been working off tape only their whole career, and digital is just the latest thing. They're not going to alter the thing. I said, I need to do an album start to finish and have no reference other than the one I'm working on. I will not go back and hear what I previously did. I'm not going to hear the one I'm going to do next until I do it. So when I got to the point where I did 10 in a row without hearing them, and then I could needle drop and go, fuck, those all sound like it's the same record. The levels work together. I top and tail them and I'm done. So I still work to this day like that. I rarely needle drop. I would prefer to work quick, get through the whole thing, then listen and go, yeah, I'm going to redo that first one again. That's much quicker to me than bouncing back and forth and not being able to make a decision.
It sounds like you're much more of a gut reactive mastering engineer where, if you're listening in the moment, you're like, okay, this is what it needs.
But also I'm not, because I am totally cerebral. It's all in my head. It's basically, I have trained my brain. I'm a human computer. I'm basically a squishware computer. And so when that thing comes up, my brain, I have a representation of the frequency response of the track and the vocal in my head. And I'm watching that response, that visual line of the frequency response change as I search for where I'm going to pull out that boxy thing. And then I go, I don't have synesthesia, but I know exactly from a mathematics perspective, from a science perspective, exactly what I'm doing every time I do something. And the judging of whether I like it or not, that part might kind of be from the gut, but I'm not one of those guys that aims to make it emotionally more acceptable or like,
Gotcha.
I'm gonna make this so the listener's gonna cry when I hear this. Cause like I'm lucky if maybe once a year I get choked up. Like I'm completely desensitized to all music. 50 years of making a living from working in music. I don't give a fuck what the music is. I'm only there to listen to the sounds. I'm only there to curate the texture, the sounds. And so when I please myself, it's with a squishware pleasing of the program that the sounds and the texture are all exactly where I want them to be. Yeah,
Okay.
I couldn't tell you anything about the lyrics or about, it's been a normal operating procedure. Last night, I got a test pressing before I left the house. I went around to the front door. I was like, oh, fuck, there was a test pressing. I know what I'll do tonight. So I went home, turned on the tubes, turned on the stereo because the vacuum tubes get ready to warm up, made something to eat, got my test pressing out, fed the cat, sat down. I was like, all right. Took a couple of hits off my bowl because like, yeah, I gotta listen for clicks and pops. I don't even remember what this album sounded like. I know I like this guy. I've done a bunch of records for him, so I know I'm going to like it, but I have no memory of anything on this record. I'm sure it's going to be good. And I learned to kind of toke out during the chemo and my stomach would kill me and I just fucking take gummies and smoke weed at night. So, I take my 3 hits. I'm like, all right, I'm ready. I put on the record and I'm totally drawn into it. And I'm like, oh my God. This is his fucking masterpiece. This is the best songwriting, I think, of the 6 records I've done with this guy.
You're just enjoying it as a fan now.
I gotta text this guy immediately. I was like, I'm not even gonna interrupt that. I'm in it. I'm in the zone. I am completely here for it. And I forget to listen for clicks or pops. Side A goes by, I turn it over, side B goes by, I get up, I was like, is that all? Have I listened to side A? And I go, oh, it's side B. I guess I listened to A. I was like, well, okay, that's it. I'm going to go up and listen to the podcast and go to sleep. And like, I was so into the record that it was just this epiphanous moment and it's like that for every test pressing I put on. I've forgotten the music. I don't know if I'm going to like it. I'm like, you know what? These motherfuckers should pay me to listen to this stuff. And Danny's like, do you want me to charge them? I'm like, no. That's just being a little bitch. I'll just listen to it. So I go home and half the time I'm going to be like, well, this is going to be a waste of my next 40 minutes. Or, I don't remember this project at all because my neurological system is so fucked up. Like my short-term memory is fucked. It is PHUCK with a capital P. And so I mean, when Danny says, okay, you're going to do those instrumentals from so-and-so, I was like, when did I do that? She's like, you did that like last week on Friday. I was like, okay, that's fine. I can't remember what anything sounds like until I hit spacebar or play on the tape deck. And it's like, oh, yeah, this stuff. God, I love this stuff. And so I know I love music, but I don't ever have that when I'm mastering. I'm a squishware human computer.
And that's definitely part of the gig, right? And then at the end of the day, you get to just once you're done, you get to appreciate the fruits of your labor later.
Well, for me, if it's music that I don't particularly love or like it didn't sound great, I still love putting the pieces of the puzzle together to make it sound as close to exactly how my ear wants it to sound than ever.
Makes sense.
And I will tell you, along with that, I'm very cavalier. Like you send me a bunch of notes, I'm not going to read them. I don't give a fuck what you think it should sound like. You're not equipped to decide what it should sound like. You've been baked in the bubble for anywhere from a month to fucking 10 years. You're the least equipped to give me insight into how you think it should sound. I'm not going to read it. I don't want to talk to you. Fuck off. Leave me alone. When I do it, you'll love it. If you don't, I'm happy to do another revision for no charge. If we get to 3 or 4, I might start to charge you a little bit, but I'll chase it with you. I don't mind chasing it. We can chase spacing. We can chase that one line that needs to come up. But if you're not immediately telling me I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread on version 1, I'm going to evaluate whether I'm going to do a version 2 or whether I'm going to give you your money back and send you to somebody else. That's how hardcore I am.
Yeah, you just want to make sure that it's going to be aligned with their vision, that they're going to get what they ultimately want out of it too. For that, I respect that.
Ultimately, I want them to be 110% pleased. And when they are psyched, I'm super psyched. That's always my thing, is to please them. But the only way I can please them is to only please myself with no input from them. Don't tell me anything. Leave me alone. When I send it to you, shut up and just know it's the best it's ever going to be. We laugh. Of course, I'm laughing about all this stuff. Like, any readers that hear this, you better know I'm saying this tongue in cheek. Like, it's all 100%. It's 100% true. But at the same time, I'm never quite this much of a dick to somebody on the phone if I talk to him, because it's impossible to talk to me because Danny is a wall against, I don't ever want to talk to you. Don't call me. I'll call you. And I do reach out sometimes if I get a new client who's, wow, this guy's really good. He doesn't have it yet, but he is going to be good. I'm going to call and give him some mix pointers if he's open to that. And, you know, I have fucking Grammys and gold records from mixes. So it's like, I think I can tell you how to improve your mixes. But yet, if you send me something and the note from Danny says, they'd love for you to tell them what they can improve on their mix, I'm like, you know, there's not a snowball's chance in hell I'm going to call this guy back and tell him, because unless he's got 20,000 hours, it's not like, oh, dude, everything is perfect, but next time turn the bass down a little bit. I'm just going to say, you know what? Your mixes are not there yet. I can tell you how to do it, but that's a course that you're going to have to pay me for. You need another 10,000 hours. Don't look at anything on the internet. I'll give you one tip right now. Don't make everything brighter than the top end of the vocal. Have a nice day.
I think that's a great spot to wrap up, man. Well, Dave, I do appreciate you taking the time to hop on here today and tell us, like, give us the whole story, because I think it is important for people to hear. Like, I think you gave probably the most detailed story of your career, but I think that's great to hear, because I think it's great to hear because people need to hear, like, the ups and downs and the challenges. And
I wanted to spend more on how I do stuff because I'm happy to share every single thing. I regularly work with young engineers on Instagram, say, hey man, your stuff's pretty good. Do you want to get better? Here's a mix. Do your thing, send it back to me, and then I'll send you my version of it. And I say, look, okay, now I'm not going to tell you exactly what did you do. You're going to have to reverse engineer, because that's the way I learned. I learned by not getting the gig because Ted's was louder. I was like, all right, I got to be as loud as this motherfucker and find out how he does it. And through force of will, it wasn't on the internet. I just figured out how to make my shit as loud as Ted's and have it sound just as good.
Yeah, you just challenge yourself.
That's what you got to do. So, you know, it's...
Yeah.
But I wish I had a little bit more time to get into the specifics of the signal flow, because I have many different ways.
It's all good, man. I would definitely have a lot more that we can dive into with that. Hopefully we can, we'll have you back another time and we can go even deeper with that. Yeah. But again, Dave, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it.
Mike, thank you so much. You're the best. And I look forward to listening to some more podcasts. And thank you so much for having me on.
Appreciate it, man.
All right, man.
So that was my episode with Dave McNair. And geez, for someone who says that he doesn't have a great memory, he really remembered a lot about his history. I can't even remember what I had for lunch yesterday. Like, literally, I can't. So, you know, to hear Dave's journey and all of those little details that go into it, I thought was really interesting. And I thought that it really served as a great reminder that nobody gets to where they're going in a straight line, especially in the music industry. There's always going to be bumps along the road. There's always going to be things that get in your way, doubts, imposter syndrome. There's a lot of that kind of stuff, and it can very easily derail you. But you have to just constantly check in with yourself and make sure that you know what you're really passionate about, and just believe in yourself enough that you're going to keep going at it, keep reinventing yourself if you have to, because eventually you're going to get to where you want to be. I really admired hearing him talk about that story of watching The Lion King with his kid and getting that phone call and just realizing that in that moment, he realized that he was done with recording and that he needed something else. And that wasn't his sign to quit doing what he was doing, but to realize like he just enjoyed music so much that he was going to find a way to keep that in his life, and mastering ended up being that next thing. So I just thought that it was a really good reminder that, things are going to get hard, but that doesn't mean that you have to quit. It doesn't mean you have to give up on your dream. You just have to find ways to do it, even if it doesn't look exactly the way you thought it would be, right? So yeah, I thought that was a refreshing story to hear. I also thought it was great to learn more about his mastering process and his philosophies on this stuff, especially with the idea of putting the vocals first, not just in a mix context, but also in mastering and how he does that. And even the fact that he was talking about EQing in MS mode instead of stereo, I thought was really cool too. And it really makes sense with that vocal first approach to mastering, because when you have access to the mids with EQ, you can really dial in the right sounds for the vocals and all that other stuff that's in the middle, but vocals being the primary thing there. So it definitely makes sense to use that MS technique. And then even when he was getting into his workflow and how he likes to work in real time so that he can work fast, I also thought that that was really cool to hear. It just goes to show you the level of confidence that he has, that he can just put something on and immediately react to it. And yeah, he did say that he will go back, but when he's working on a record, he's working very fast. He's getting the overall landscape of the record from one solid listen, and then he'll do his fine tweaking. But a lot of people will hum and haw over every single thing. They'll click around and, as he called it, needle dropping. They'll pick spots in songs and just nitpick over that kind of stuff. But some of the best mastering engineers I know are the ones that are the fastest and that just really do trust their gut, move fast, and not get caught up in all of the technical stuff. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting to learn about as well. So I hope that you really enjoyed that episode. And if any part of this episode resonated with you, especially like around the feeling of comparing your work to other people that are maybe further along and not knowing what to actually change in your own process to achieve that level of sound, that's exactly what I help people with inside of my coaching program, Amplitude. That program is really about helping you get the clarity that you need to get the sounds that you hear in your head to come out of the speakers. And I'll walk you through a step-by-step process for recording, editing, and mixing your music in a way that makes sense for your goals. From one of our first calls, we're going to establish what is that sound that you want? What are the things that inspire you about music? What do you want to achieve with your music? And then we go break down your process and talk about every decision along the way to get there. And not just for one song, but we're going to talk about how to adapt your process so that it can apply to multiple songs. And so that if you do need to change things up, you could still do that, but you have the confidence of knowing what decisions to make, when and where, and why. The goal here is to give you confidence in your process, to help you finish music fast and be proud of the work that you're making so that you can finally feel like you can release it. So if that sounds like something that would be interesting to you, I'm currently offering free production clarity calls. If you visit MasterYourMix.com/amplitude, these calls are basically an opportunity to learn more about what you're working on, your process, where you're feeling stuck, and to see where you might want to focus your energy to start to move past your plateaus and actually make progress. And if it seems like I can help you throughout that process, we could talk about what it would look like to work with each other. If you choose to go on your own, that's totally cool. If you want someone in your corner that can walk you through and give you feedback at every step of the way and open up mixes with you and do all that, yeah, we could talk about what that would look like as well. So once again, if you're interested in hopping on a free production clarity call to learn more about what to focus on with your own production, visit MasterYourMix.com/amplitude, and you can find the link to do that there. And with that said, we've reached the end of this episode. Thank you so much for sticking around, and I can't wait to chat with you in the next one. We'll talk soon. Take care. Thanks for listening to the Master Your Mix podcast. Please make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app and leave a review. If you have any questions or comments for the podcast, send an email to questions@masteryourmix.com. And for more information on how to create pro recordings from your home studio, visit masteryourmix.com.